The message came through at 400 hours, and Blake knew immediately that everything was about to change. He sat in his quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel Endeavour, staring at the red emergency icon flashing on his screen. For 3 years, he had served as humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Council, and in all that time, he had never received a Priority 1 transmission. He opened the file with hands that remained steady despite the cold fear settling in his gut. The Council's seal appeared first, followed by text that made his blood run cold. It was an ultimatum. Humanity had 72 hours to surrender control of all military forces and submit to complete galactic oversight. Failure to comply would result in what the Council called corrective measures. Read through the document twice, his mind racing through the implications. The Council claimed humanity had violated 18 separate galactic laws. They listed territorial violations, unauthorized military expansion, and aggressive posturing toward peaceful species. Each charge was carefully worded, each accusation backed by what appeared to be solid evidence. But knew the truth was far different. The so-called violations were nothing more than standard defensive measures. Human colonies on the frontier faced constant raids from pirates and hostile forces. The Council had ignored repeated requests for protection, leaving humanity to defend itself. Now they called that defense a crime. He reached for his communicator and called Morgan, the military liaison assigned to his diplomatic mission. She arrived within minutes, still pulling on her uniform jacket. Was young for her position, barely 30, but she had proven herself invaluable over the past year. She read situations faster than anyone had ever met. "Sir," she asked, seeing his expression. Handed her the tablet without a word. He watched her face as she read, saw the moment she understood what they were facing. Her jaw tightened and her eyes went hard. "This is insane," said quietly. "These charges are garbage, they know it and we know it." "The question is why," replied. He stood and began packing his small quarters. "The Council doesn't make moves like this without reason. This ultimatum, the 72-hour deadline, the threat of force, something else is happening here." Pulled up her own data pad and began typing rapidly. Her fingers flew across the screen as she accessed secure channels and intelligence networks. Had learned to trust her instincts. When got that focused look, she was usually onto something important. "I need to check something," she said. "Give me 20 minutes." Spent those 20 minutes drafting a preliminary response to the Council. He kept his tone diplomatic but firm. Humanity would respond to the charges, but they would not be bullied. He was polishing the 3rd paragraph when burst back into his quarters without knocking. "Sir, we have a serious problem," she said. Her face had gone pale. "I cracked into the Council's secondary communication network. They're not even trying to hide it very well. There's a coalition, 12 species working together. They planned this whole thing." She pulled up intercepted messages on the wall screen, read them with growing horror. The ultimatum was just the first step. The coalition had already positioned fleets near every major human colony and Earth itself. They had drawn up plans to divide human territories among themselves. They viewed humanity as a resource to be exploited, not a civilization to be respected. "They never intended to wait for our response," said slowly. The full picture was becoming clear. "This ultimatum is just for show. They want us to refuse so they have an excuse to attack." "That's what I think too," agreed. "But why? Why target humanity specifically? We're not the strongest military power. We're not the richest. What makes us a threat?" Thought about that question. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 200 years ago. In that brief time, they had established dozens of colonies, built a respectable fleet, and earned a reputation as fierce traders and determined explorers. But nothing that should provoke this kind of response. Unless it wasn't about what humanity was now, but what they might become. "We're advancing too fast," said. "Look at our technological growth. 2 centuries ago, we had barely left our own solar system. Now we're matching species that have been in space for thousands of years. We adapt quickly. We innovate constantly. Maybe that scares them." Nodded slowly. "A young species that refuses to accept limits. That challenges old assumptions. That might inspire other species to question the Council's authority." "Exactly," said. "This isn't about territory or military threats. This is about control. The Council has maintained power by keeping everyone in their place. Humanity doesn't fit their model. We're unpredictable, dangerous not because of our weapons, but because of our ideas." They stood in silence for a moment, both understanding the magnitude of what they faced. The Council had decided humanity was a problem that needed to be solved. They would use force if necessary, and they had already positioned their pieces for war. "We need to warn Earth," said. "They need to know what's coming." Sat down at his desk and began composing an urgent message to the president. He detailed everything they had discovered, included the intercepted communications, and made his recommendation clear. Humanity needed to prepare for war, not because they wanted it, but because the Council had already decided to attack. As he worked, coordinated with the few other human personnel on the endeavor, they needed to evacuate non-essential staff before things got worse. The Council wouldn't take kindly to humans who knew their secrets walking around freely. The message to Earth took an hour to complete, reviewed it 3 times, making sure he had included every critical detail. Then he encrypted it with the highest-level security codes and sent it through the fastest channels available. In 12 hours, Earth would have the information. In 72 hours, humanity would need to give its answer. Knew what that answer would be. He had grown up hearing stories about humanity's history, about the wars and struggles that had nearly destroyed Earth before uniting it. He knew the one constant in all those stories. Humanity might bend under pressure. They might compromise and negotiate, but they would not kneel. They would not surrender their freedom to anyone. The Council had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed humanity would react like other species, following the established patterns of galactic politics. They thought threats and superior numbers would force compliance. They had no idea they were dealing with a species that had earned its place among the stars through sheer stubborn determination. Returned to his quarters as dawn cycle began on the Endeavor. Ship's lighting gradually brightened, mimicking Earth's sun. It seemed appropriate somehow, that false dawn marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. "I've sent everything we have to Admiral Harrison and the fleet commanders," she reported. "They'll start quiet preparations immediately." "Good," said. He felt oddly calm now that the decision was made. The Council broke the line when they decided to threaten us. They crossed a boundary that should never be crossed. Now they'll learn what happens when you push humanity too far. President stood at the window of her office, looking out over the city below. The sun was rising over Geneva, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It would have been beautiful if not for the message sitting on her desk. The message that changed everything. She had been president of United Earth for 4 years. In that time, she had dealt with economic crises, natural disasters, and political conflicts. Nothing had prepared her for this moment. Nothing could prepare anyone for the decision she now faced. Behind her, the room filled with the people who would help make that decision. Admiral Jake Harrison entered first, his uniform crisp despite the early hour. He was followed by General Cole, head of Earth's ground forces. Dr. Lisa, the chief science advisor, came next, carrying a tablet covered in data. Finally, Secretary of State Daniel closed the door behind him. "Thank you all for coming so quickly," said, turning from the window. "I assume you've all read Ambassador Blake's report." They nodded, their faces grim. Jake spoke first. "The Council's positioned their fleets exactly where they'd need them for a coordinated strike. They have ships near Earth, Mars, New Terra, and every major colony. This wasn't planned recently. They've been moving assets for months." "Can we defend against it?" asked directly. Jake hesitated, and that hesitation told her more than words could. "In a straight fight? No, they outnumber us 3-1 in capital ships, 5-1 overall, but we're not going to fight straight. I've already started repositioning our forces. If they attack, we'll make them pay for every inch." Leaned forward. "Our ground forces are ready. The colonies have been drilling for raids and emergencies. We can hold defensive positions longer than they expect. But Admiral Harrison is right. We can't win by matching them ship for ship." Lisa cleared her throat. "I have something that might help. We've been monitoring Council communications since sent his warning. We cracked their encryption 3 hours ago." She pulled up data on the main screen. "The Council species use standardized military technology. It hasn't changed significantly in 500 years. They have better weapons than us in raw power, but their systems are predictable, rigid. We can exploit that." Studied the data. Tactical reports, fleet compositions, communication protocols. Lisa was right. The Council had grown comfortable with their technological superiority. They hadn't innovated because they hadn't needed to. "How long do we have?" asked. Daniel checked his tablet. The ultimatum expires in 61 hours, but based on their fleet positions, they could attack at any moment. The deadline is just theater. Returned to her desk and sat down. She pulled up the Council's ultimatum on her screen and read it again. The demands were impossible. Surrender all military authority. Submit to galactic oversight. Accept permanent restrictions on human expansion and development. Become, essentially, a subject species rather than an equal partner. My grandfather fought in the Third World War, said quietly. The others listened, knowing she rarely spoke about her family. He was 17 when it started, joined up the day after his birthday. He told me stories when I was young about the war and what came after, about the choice people had to make between freedom and security. She looked up at them. He said the hardest thing about war isn't the fighting. It's the moment before it starts when you have to decide if the cause is worth the cost. Because once you make that choice, there's no going back. Jake met her eyes. Madame President, if we submit to this ultimatum, humanity becomes a vassal state. We'll never be allowed to grow, to expand, to reach our potential. They'll control everything we do. And the next time some council species decides we're a problem, we won't have the ability to resist. And if we refuse, asked. War, said bluntly. A war we might lose. Thousands, maybe millions of casualties, colonies destroyed, Earth itself could be threatened. But we'd be fighting for our right to exist as equals, Lisa added. Fighting for our children's future, for the principle that no species has the right to enslave another. Stood and walked to the window again. Below, the city was coming alive. People going to work, starting their days, living their lives. They didn't know yet that those lives hung in the balance, that a decision made in this room would determine whether humanity remained free or became subjects of an alien empire. She thought about her grandfather again, about the stories he told of standing against tyranny, of refusing to accept defeat even when victory seemed impossible. He had been part of the generation that united Earth, that ended the cycle of wars and created a world government based on human dignity and freedom. Now another generation faced a similar choice: kneel or fight, submit or resist. Daniel, draft a response to the council, said, her voice firm with decision. Tell them humanity rejects their ultimatum in its entirety. We will not surrender our sovereignty, our military independence, or our right to self-determination. Tell them if they want war, they will have it. Daniel nodded and began typing. Jake allowed himself a small smile, straightened in her chair. Lisa let out a breath she had been holding. Jake, start preparing the fleet for full combat operations, continued. Activate all reserves and put the colonies on high alert. Lisa, I want every advantage your science team can give us. Weapons, shields, tactics, anything that might make a difference. Yes, Madame President, they replied in unison. One more thing, said. I'll address the United Earth Assembly this afternoon, then broadcast to all colonies. People deserve to know what's coming and why we're making this choice. They deserve the truth. The meeting broke up, each person moving to execute their orders. Sat alone in her office for a few minutes, gathering her thoughts. Then she began writing her speech. The words came easily because they came from the heart. 6 hours later, she stood before the assembly. Representatives from every nation and colony filled the chamber. Billions more watched on screens across human space. Took a deep breath and began to speak. She explained the situation simply and directly. The Council's ultimatum, the impossible demands, the evidence of conspiracy, the fleets already in position to attack. She laid out the choice they faced and the decision she had made. Some will say we should submit, said, her voice carrying through the chamber. That we should accept these terms to avoid war, that survival is more important than freedom. I understand that argument. I feel the weight of it in every fiber of my being. She paused, letting the words settle. But I also know something else. I know that humanity did not claw its way out of darkness, did not survive wars and disasters and near extinction, did not reach for the stars against all odds, just to kneel before those who fear our potential. We did not become who we are by accepting chains, no matter how comfortable those chains might be. The chamber was absolutely silent. The Galactic Council has broken the line between diplomacy and tyranny. They have chosen threats over negotiation, force over reason. They believe we will submit because we are young, because we are outnumbered, because we understand the cost of resistance. They are wrong. His voice grew stronger. Humanity will not surrender. We will fight if we must. We will defend our colonies, our worlds, our right to exist as free people. Not because we want war, but because some things are worth fighting for. Freedom is worth fighting for. Dignity is worth fighting for. The future we will build together is worth fighting for." She looked directly into the cameras, knowing her words would reach across space to every human colony. "To the Galactic Council, I say this. We did not ask for this conflict, but we will not run from it. You have mistaken our youth for weakness, our hope for naivety, our desire for peace for fear of war. You are about to learn the truth about humanity. You are about to learn what happens when you threaten everything we hold dear." Took a breath. Earth is called for a reason. We evolved in fire and ice, in predators and disasters, in competition and cooperation. We are survivors. We are builders. We are warriors when we must be. And when we stand together, when we fight for what we believe in, we are unstoppable. The assembly erupted in applause, but wasn't finished. "To all humans, wherever you are, the days ahead will be hard. We will face challenges we cannot yet imagine. We will pay costs that break our hearts. But we will face them together as we always have. And when this is over, when we stand on the other side of this darkness, we will still be free. That is my promise to you." She stepped back from the podium. The applause continued for minutes, left the chamber and returned to her office. There was work to do, plans to finalize, a war to prepare for. Daniel was waiting with the Council's response to humanity's rejection. It was brief and cold. The Council would proceed with corrective measures. Diplomatic relations were severed. Human ships had 12 hours to leave Council space. Read it and set it aside. They had made their move. Now she had made hers. The galaxy would soon discover what humanity was truly capable of when pushed to the breaking point. In orbit above Earth, Admiral Jake Harrison received the order to begin combat operations. The human fleet began moving, taking up positions that would maximize their advantages while minimizing the enemy's numerical superiority. Across human space, soldiers and sailors prepared for battle. Commander Torres watched the enemy fleet approach on his tactical display. 40 Council warships, their hulls gleaming in the light of New Terra's sun. They moved in perfect formation, confident and unhurried. They expected an easy victory. Stood on the bridge of the destroyer Valiant, his hands clasped behind his back. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment, but training was different from the real thing. In minutes, they would know if humanity's tactics could match the Council's superior firepower. "Enemy fleet is entering weapons range in 5 minutes, Lieutenant Ben Foster reported from the tactical station. "They're maintaining formation, no evasive patterns." Nodded, that was the Council's first mistake. They fought by the book, following procedures refined over centuries. But those procedures assumed their enemies would fight the same way. Humanity had different ideas. "All ships, this is Valiant," said into the fleet channel. "Remember the plan, stay unpredictable, use the terrain, make them chase us. We can't match their firepower, so we won't try. We'll make them work for every shot." On the planet below, Marine Commander Emma checked her equipment one final time. Her battalion was dug into defensive positions around the colony's main settlement. They had mines, artillery, and determination. They would need all three. "Enemy launching," her second-in-command, Lieutenant Greg Murray, reported. "Looks like 2,000 troops, maybe more." Emma looked at her Marines, young faces, scared but ready. They knew the odds. Council troops outnumbered them 5-1 with better weapons and armor. But Marines didn't win by having better equipment. They won by being tougher, smarter, and meaner than anyone expected. "Listen up," Emma called out to her battalion. "The Council thinks we're soft. They think because we're young in space, we don't know how to fight. They're about to learn different. New Terra is our home. These people, these families behind us, they're counting on us. We don't retreat. We don't surrender. We make these aliens regret ever coming here." The Marines roared their approval. Emma smiled grimly. Fear could break an army, but so could fury. She planned to give the Council troops a healthy dose of both. In space, the battle began with a thunderous exchange of fire. The Council fleet opened up with their main guns, powerful beams designed to slice through ship armor. But the Valiant wasn't where they expected. Had ordered a full burn at the last second, diving under the enemy formation and into the cover of New Terra's asteroid belt. "All ships scatter formation," commanded. "Make them split their fire." The human fleet broke apart, each ship taking a different vector. The Council fleet, trained to fight in coordinated groups, struggled to respond. They had to either break formation themselves or let some human ships escape their firing arcs. They chose to maintain formation, a decision that cost them. Brought the Valiant around behind a large asteroid and waited. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Karen Phillips, watched her screens intently. Enemy cruiser approaching, bearing 270. Range, 30,000 kilometers and closing. "Wait for it," said calmly. The Council cruiser was 3 times the Valiant's size, with shields that could absorb tremendous punishment. A direct fight would be suicide, but didn't plan to fight directly. The cruiser came around the asteroid, its sensors scanning for the human destroyer. Counted to 3, then gave the order. Full power to engines, ramming speed. The Valiant shot forward, accelerating hard. The Council cruiser fired, but the Valiant was already moving, the beams missing by meters. Watched the distance close. 10,000 kilometers, 5,000, 1,000. At the last possible second, pulled the ship into a hard turn that pushed the crew against their restraints. The Valiant screamed past the cruiser's bow, close enough that could see the alien script on its hull. Karen fired every weapon at point-blank range into the cruiser's weakest point, the sensor array and bridge section. The cruiser's shields, designed to stop energy weapons from a distance, couldn't adapt fast enough to the close-range barrage. The Valiant's missiles and rounds tore into the cruiser's forward section, destroying sensors and killing the crew in the command center. "Break off emergency thrust," ordered. The Valiant dove away as the crippled cruiser began to spin, its stabilizers damaged. Other human ships converged on it, finishing what the Valiant had started. On the planet, the Council landed in a clearing 5 kilometers from the main settlement. Emma watched them through her scope. The aliens deployed in textbook fashion, forming up in organized units. Good training, bad tactics for this fight. "Let them advance," Emma ordered. "Wait until they hit the first minefield." The Council troops moved forward confidently. They wore powered armor that could shrug off conventional weapons. They carried energy rifles that could cut through concrete. They had air support and artillery. They had every advantage except one. They didn't understand the terrain, and they didn't know who they were fighting. The lead elements of the alien force reached the tree line that marked the edge of human defenses. Emma counted silently, watching the formation. 3, 2, 1. The first mines detonated in a chain reaction that ripped through the alien formation. The explosions were crude by galactic standards, simple chemical charges mixed with shrapnel. But they worked. Dozens of Council troops went down, their armor cracked or breached. "Fire," Emma commanded. Her Marines opened up with everything they had. That could punch through armor. Missiles guided by human instinct rather than electronic targeting that aliens could jam. Simple kinetic weapons that the Council had considered obsolete centuries ago. Against powered armor in open terrain, these weapons should have been ineffective. In dense forest with prepared positions and overlapping fields of fire, they were devastating. The Council troops tried to return fire, but they couldn't see their targets. Emma's Marines used natural cover, changed positions constantly, and fought with a ferocity the aliens hadn't anticipated. Every time the Council tried to advance, they ran into another prepared position, another minefield, another ambush. Lieutenant Murray coordinated artillery strikes on the alien landing zone, destroying 2 before they could deploy their troops. The Council force, which had expected to overwhelm the colony in hours, found itself down in a grinding battle against an enemy that refused to fight fair. In space, the battle raged for 8 hours. Tactics forced the Council fleet to split up, breaking their coordinated formations. Human ships used asteroids, the planet's gravity well, and their own damaged vessels as weapons. When the destroyer Resolute took critical damage and lost main power, her captain didn't abandon ship. Instead, he aimed his crippled vessel at a Council battleship and fired emergency thrusters at full burn. The Council battleship destroyed the Resolute with long-range fire, but the human destroyer's momentum carried the wreckage forward. Thousands of tons of metal and explosives slammed into the battleship's shields at high velocity. The shields collapsed under the impact, and debris tore into the battleship's hull. Watched it happen and felt sick. Good people had just died, but their sacrifice had shown the Council something important. Humans didn't just fight for victory, they fought with everything they had, including their lives when necessary. The tide of the battle shifted slowly. The Council fleet had superior ships and weapons, but they were fighting an enemy that didn't follow the rules. Human ships attacked from unexpected angles, used debris as cover, and coordinated in ways that seemed random but were actually carefully planned chaos. Ben called out new contacts on the tactical display. "Sir, enemy fleet is pulling back. They're regrouping at the edge of the system." Studied the display. The Council had lost 15 ships to humanity's 7. By the standards of galactic warfare, that was a catastrophic exchange rate. The Council commander was probably trying to figure out what had gone wrong. On the ground, the Council forces finally retreated to their landing zone after 6 hours of brutal combat. Emma's Marines had held every position, inflicting heavy casualties while giving up minimal ground. The aliens called for pickup, their formations broken and their morale shattered. Emma watched the liftoff through her scope. Her battalion had taken losses, good people she had trained with and fought beside. But they had held. New Terra remained in human hands. Received reports from across the battlefield. The Council fleet was withdrawing, moving back beyond the system's edge. The ground assault had failed completely. New Terra was secure. He opened a channel to the planet. "Commander, this is Valiant. Nice work down there." Emma's voice came back tired but triumphant. "You too, Commander. We held the line." "That we did," agreed. "That we did." The Council fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel and disappeared. Fleet Admiral, commanding the attack, sent his report back to the Council. The message was brief but shocking. The humans had repelled their attack. The primitive species had fought with tactics and determination that everything the Council thought they knew about warfare. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. The Council had attacked with overwhelming force and been turned back. Humanity had proven they could fight, that they would fight, and that the cost of conquering them would be far higher than anyone anticipated. On Earth, President Received's report with relief and sadness. They had won, but the cost had been significant. 7 ships lost, over 300 casualties on the ground. Families would grieve tonight. 3 months into the war, Ambassador Blake sat in a small cafe on the neutral world of Station. Across from him, Ambassador of the People sipped a drink that smelled like copper and looked nervous. "You understand the risk I am taking," said, his translator turning his clicking speech into human words. "If the Council discovers we are meeting, my people could face sanctions or worse." Nodded. "I understand, but you came anyway. Why?" His 3 eyes blinked in sequence. "Because what the Council is doing is wrong. They are traitors, not warriors. We value honesty in our dealings. The Council lied about humanity. They manufactured evidence, twisted facts, and started a war based on greed and fear." He pulled out a data chip and slid it across the table. "This contains proof. Communications between Council members discussing the conspiracy. Plans drawn up months before the ultimatum. Evidence they suppressed about human defensive actions being justified. Release this, and neutral species will see the truth." Took the chip carefully. "This could change everything. Why give it to me?" "Because the galaxy needs to see what you humans have shown us," replied. "You are not breaking under pressure. You are fighting for principles, not territory. You fight harder than species with centuries more experience, yet you still show mercy to prisoners and try to minimize civilian casualties. You are what the Council should be, but is not." After left, encrypted the data and sent it through secure channels to Earth. He felt hope for the first time in weeks. The war was far from over, but maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't have to fight alone. On the destroyer Valiant, Torres reviewed reports from the latest engagement. His task force had ambushed a Council supply convoy, destroying 6 cargo ships and capturing 2 Council officers. The interrogations revealed critical information about Council fleet movements and supply routes. But felt the weight of constant combat. The Valiant had been in 15 engagements since New Terra. They had won most of them, but each victory came with a cost. Empty bunks where crew members once slept. Names added to the memorial wall. Families back home receiving the news that broke hearts. Lieutenant Corinne Phillips entered his ready room with fresh intelligence. "Sir, we've identified another supply depot, lightly defended but strategically important. Admiral Harrison wants us to hit it within 48 hours. Studied the tactical data. The depot supplied 3 Council fleets operating near human space. Destroying it would force those fleets to pull back for resupply. But the mission was dangerous, requiring his task force to penetrate deep into Council territory. "Tell the Admiral we'll do it," said. But I want electronic warfare support and a backup plan if things go wrong. Karen nodded and left, looked at the photo on his desk. His sister and her 2 kids living on Earth. They were part of the reason he fought, so they could grow up free without fear of alien oppression. Every mission, every risk was for them and millions like them. On New Terra, Emma oversaw training for new Marine recruits. Fresh faces replacing those lost in the first battle. She pushed them hard because hard training meant they might survive their first real combat. Lieutenant Greg Murray joined her on the training field. "Commander, we just received word. The Council is massing forces for another push. Intelligence thinks they'll hit multiple colonies simultaneously this time." Emma watched her recruits practice squad tactics. "Then we need to be ready. The first battle taught us they'll come in force, but they still don't understand how we fight. We use that." She thought about the lessons from New Terra. Council troops were well-trained and well-equipped, but they followed rigid protocols. They expected enemies to do the same. Human Marines were different. They adapted constantly, used unconventional tactics, and fought with a personal investment in victory that alien mercenaries couldn't match. On Earth, Dr. Lisa worked 18-hour days in her laboratory. Her team had been analyzing captured Council technology and developing counters. The work was exhausting but essential. Every new weapon system, every improved defense, meant human ships and soldiers had better chances of survival. Her latest project involved modifying human shield generators to better resist Council energy weapons. Standard shields worked by dispersing energy across their entire surface. Lisa's team had found a way to concentrate shield strength at the point of impact, effectively tripling their defensive capacity for short periods. "Run the simulation again," Lisa told her assistant. Numbers scrolled across screens as computers tested the new design against recorded Council weapon signatures. The results looked promising. President reviewed casualty reports and felt the weight of command like a physical burden. 800 dead in the latest engagements. Thousands wounded. 3 colonies evacuated under fire. The costs kept mounting. But so did the victories. Humanity had won more battles than they lost. Council fleets were pulling back from some sectors, unwilling to accept the casualties that fighting humans demanded. Intelligence suggested fractures appearing in the Council coalition as member species questioned the war's purpose and cost. Admiral Jake Harrison stood in the Fleet Command Center, coordinating operations across human space. His forces were outnumbered, but they were winning through superior tactics and sheer determination. Human captains had learned to exploit every advantage, using speed, unpredictability, and aggressive action to offset the Council's numerical superiority. "Admiral, we have a problem," his intelligence officer reported. "Council is reinforcing their border fleets. They're preparing for a major offensive, possibly targeting Earth itself." Jake studied the force deployments. The Council was committing serious resources, trying to end the war with one decisive blow. It was a sound strategy if they could pull it off. Break humanity's will by threatening there. "We can't let them reach Earth," Jake said. "Position the fleet between their staging area and the solar system. We'll meet them before they get close." His officers began issuing orders. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, prepared for what might be the decisive battle of the war. Every available ship was called in, every reserve activated. This would determine humanity's future. Meanwhile, Morgan worked her intelligence network tirelessly. She coordinated with human agents across the galaxy, gathering information about Council movements, internal politics, and military capabilities. She had become one of the most valuable assets in the war effort. Her latest discovery was significant. The Council's economy was straining under the war's costs. Trade networks had collapsed as species refused to do business with Council members. Several minor species were demanding the war end, threatening to withdraw from the Council entirely. Sent her report to President and Ambassador Blake. The Council was becoming desperate. That made them dangerous, but it also meant humanity's strategy was working. By refusing to break, by making the war too costly to sustain, humans were forcing the Council to reconsider. Task Force successfully destroyed the supply depot, though they lost 1 destroyer in the process. The Valiant limped back to human space for repairs, her hull from multiple hits, stood on the bridge and looked at his exhausted crew. They had done the impossible again and again. How much longer could they keep it up? Emma's battalion repelled another attack on New Terra, this time with fewer casualties because her Marines had learned from experience. Each battle made them more effective, more confident. The Council was finding that the longer the war went on, the more dangerous humanity became. Lisa's shield modifications were installed on the fleet just in time for the coming battle. Admiral Harrison tested them personally and found they worked even better than promised. Human ships could now survive hits that would have destroyed them weeks ago. President addressed the assembly again, this time with better news. The Council expected us to break within weeks. They thought we would sue for peace after the first defeats. Instead, we have held every world, won most battles, and forced them to question their own strategy. She paused, letting her words sink in. But the war is not over. The Council is preparing a final offensive. They will try to break us with overwhelming force. We must stand firm one more time. We must show the entire galaxy, that humanity's resolve is truly made of iron. The assembly erupted in applause but felt no joy. More people would die in the coming battle. More families would grieve. The cost kept mounting, and she bore the responsibility for every loss. But she also saw what the war had revealed about humanity. Not just their ability to fight, but their refusal to compromise their values even under extreme pressure. Human forces showed mercy to prisoners, avoided civilian targets when possible, and fought with honor even when the enemy did not. This was humanity's true strength, not their weapons or tactics, but their character. The Council had started this war expecting to face a young species that didn't understand galactic realities. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that understood those realities perfectly and rejected them. Release the information had given him through multiple channels simultaneously. Within hours, news networks across the galaxy were broadcasting the truth about the Council's conspiracy. Neutral species that had remained silent began speaking out. Some called for the Council to end the war. Others offered to mediate peace talks. The galaxy was watching, and what they saw was changing minds. Humanity fought not for conquest, but for survival. They sought not dominance, but equality. They asked only to be left alone to build their own future without interference. Admiral Harrison received reports that the Council's attack force was moving. Hundreds of ships, the largest fleet they had assembled yet. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. All ships battle stations, Jake ordered. This is what we've been preparing for. Remember your training, trust your crews. Fight smart, fight hard, and we'll send them running like we have before. The human fleet moved to meet the Council armada. Above Earth, defense stations powered up their weapons. On the ground, families waited anxiously for news. Across human colonies, people held their breath. 6 months after the war began, the Council's grand offensive fell apart before it truly started. 5 species, their fleets, refusing to continue fighting. Their governments faced domestic pressure, economic crisis, and a growing realization that the war was unjust and unwinnable. Admiral Jake Harrison watched the Council armada fragment on his tactical displays. What should have been a coordinated assault became a confused retreat as entire fleet groups peeled away and jumped to faster-than-light travel. The remaining forces, suddenly outnumbered, chose withdrawal over certain defeat. "Stand down from battle stations," Jake ordered. Around him, his bridge crew sagged with relief. They had prepared to fight the hardest battle of the war. Instead, they witnessed the Council's collapse without firing a shot. Jake felt no triumph, only exhaustion. 6 months of constant combat had taken its toll on everyone, but they had held. Humanity had survived. On New Terra, Emma received word of the Council's retreat and allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Her Marines had held this world through 3 major assaults. They had proven that human determination could overcome superior numbers and technology. Now, perhaps, they could rest. Ambassador Blake stood before the Galactic Council's reformed assembly chamber. The old council had been dissolved 3 weeks ago, its corrupt leadership facing trial for war crimes. Representatives from 40 species, including the humans who had fought so hard, gathered to build something better. The council broke the line when they chose aggression over justice, said, his voice carrying through the chamber. They believed might made right that young species should submit to the will of older ones. They were wrong. He gestured to the assembled representatives. Humanity did not fight this war for revenge or conquest. We fought for a simple principle, that every species has the right to exist free from tyranny. That principle should be the foundation of whatever comes next. A representative from the people stood. Ambassador Blake speaks truth. They propose a new galactic charter based on sovereign equality. No species may threaten another. No species may demand submission. All conflicts must be resolved through diplomacy, not force. The proposal sparked immediate debate, but the tone was different from the old council sessions. Species spoke with respect, listening to each other rather than simply demanding compliance. The war had changed galactic politics forever. President sat in her office on Earth, reading casualty reports for what she hoped would be the last time. 3,000 dead, 10,000 wounded, dozens of ships destroyed. 4 colonies had suffered significant damage. The numbers made her heart ache. But humanity had survived. More than survived, they had shown the galaxy what they were capable of. Now came the harder task, building a peace that honored those who had paid the war's price. Dr. Lisa presented her final report on technological advances made during the war. Human science had leaped forward years, maybe decades, driven by desperate necessity. New propulsion systems, improved weapons, advanced medical treatments. The innovations would benefit humanity for generations. But we must be careful, Lisa warned the president. We gained these advances through war. We cannot let them make us aggressive or arrogant. Technology without wisdom is dangerous. Nodded, agreed. We'll share what we've learned with other species, especially the defensive innovations. Let's prove that human strength comes not from hoarding advantages, but from cooperation. Commander Torres brought the Valiant home to Earth orbit for the first time in 7 months. His ship bore the scars of 24 engagements, her hull patched, and repaired so many times she looked like a patchwork quilt. But she had brought her crew home alive, and that was what mattered. Stood on the bridge, looking down at the blue and white planet below. He had fought for this world, for the people living their lives on that beautiful sphere. Now he could return to them with the knowledge that they remained free. Lieutenant Karen Phillips stood beside him. Sir, what happens to us now? The fleet, I mean. Do we just go back to patrol duty? Considered that. I don't know, but I hope we can be something better than just weapons waiting for the next war. Maybe we can be explorers again or protectors of something worth protecting. Morgan worked with the new Galactic Intelligence Network, helping establish protocols that would prevent future conspiracies like the one that started the war. She shared human intelligence methods while learning from other species. Trust would take time to build, but the foundation was being laid. On station, met again with Ambassador. The diplomat had become a friend during the war, one of the few aliens who had stood with humanity from the beginning. Your people have changed the galaxy, said. Not through conquest, but by showing us we could be better than we were. Smiled tiredly. We just refused to kneel, sometimes that's enough. It was more than enough, replied. The council ruled through fear and intimidation for centuries. Your resistance broke that power. Now we can build something based on mutual respect instead. The new Galactic Charter was 3 months after the war's end. It established the Democratic Galactic Assembly, where each species had equal representation regardless of size or power. Disputes would be resolved through arbitration, not force. Military actions required overwhelming consensus and clear justification. Former council speaker stood trial for conspiracy and war crimes. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including his own communications planning the attack on humanity. He was convicted and sentenced to permanent exile, a symbolic end to the old order. Admiral Jake Harrison faced a difficult decision about his own future. The fleet needed reorganization for peacetime. Wartime tactics and strategies would give way to exploration and defense. He chose to stay on, helping rebuild the human fleet into something that could protect without threatening. We learned hard lessons these past months, Jake told his officers. We learned we can fight when we must. Now we need to learn how to live peacefully without forgetting those lessons. A strong defense prevents wars, will be that defense. Emma returned to Earth for the first time since the war began. She had requested a transfer to Training Command, wanting to pass on the lessons her Marines had learned. The next generation would benefit from what this one had paid for in blood. She visited the memorial being built in Geneva, where names of the fallen were carved into black granite. So many names, so many lives cut short. Emma found the names of Marines from her battalion and placed her hand on the cold stone. We won, she whispered to them. You didn't die for nothing. Humanity is free because of what you gave. President gave her final speech about the war at the memorial's dedication. Thousands attended in person, billions watched across human space and the wider galaxy. "We did not want this war," said. "We sought only to live freely, to build our futures without interference. The Council gave us no choice but to fight or surrender everything we valued. We chose to fight." She gestured to the memorial. "These names represent the price of that choice. Sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, friends and loved ones. Each one had dreams, hopes, people who cared about them. They gave their lives so others could remain free." His voice grew stronger, but their sacrifice revealed something the galaxy needed to see. It revealed that might does not make right, that bullying fails when faced with courage, that even young species can stand against old powers when the cause is just. She looked directly at the cameras, knowing her words would reach across space. The Council broke the line between civilization and tyranny. Humanity rose to meet that challenge not with hatred but with iron resolve. We fought hard, but we fought honorably. We showed the galaxy that strength and principles can exist together. Paused, emotion evident in her voice. "To those who gave their lives, your names will be remembered. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. Because of you, humanity remains free. Because of you, the galaxy is better. That is the legacy you leave behind." 1 year after the war's end, a ceremony was held on New Terra. Representatives from 20 species attended, including former enemies who had fought against humanity. They came to honor the dead and celebrate the peace. Tors stood with other human officers, watching aliens and humans mingling freely. A year ago, they had been killing each other. Now they worked together to build a better future. The change was almost unbelievable. A OK warrior, one of the species that had fought hardest against humanity, approached. "Commander Tors, I fought against your ships at New Terra. You were a worthy enemy. Now I hope we can be worthy allies." Clasped the alien's arm in the human gesture the OK had learned. "We can. The past doesn't have to define the future." Blake returned to Earth and requested reassignment. He wanted to work on the new Galactic Charter, helping establish rules that would prevent future wars. President appointed him as humanity's chief representative to the Democratic Galactic Assembly. "You helped keep humanity unified during the war," told him. "Now help keep the galaxy unified during the peace." Morgan took a position coordinating between human intelligence and the new galactic security network. Her work during the war had proven the value of shared information and cooperation. She would help ensure that conspiracies like the Council's could never succeed again. Dr. Lisa received the highest civilian honor Earth could give for her contributions to the war effort. But she told reporters the real reward was seeing her work save lives. "Science should serve life, not death. We'll use what we learn to explore and create, not to destroy." Emma watched her new recruits train and felt pride mixed with sadness. These young Marines would benefit from the lessons her generation had learned the hard way, but she hoped they would never need to use those lessons in combat. Admiral Jake Harrison looked at reports showing the reorganized human fleet. Fewer ships than during the war, but better equipped and better trained. A force capable of defense but focused on exploration and cooperation. This was what the fleet should be. On Earth, families of the fallen visited the memorial regularly. They left flowers, photographs, personal items. The memorial became a place of both grief and gratitude, a reminder of what was lost and what was saved. Stood at the memorial late one evening, alone except for security. She read names in the fading light, names of people who had died because of choices she made. The weight of command would never fully lift. But she also thought about what humanity had achieved. They had stood against impossible odds and survived. They had fought a war without losing their humanity. They had shown the galaxy that being young did not mean being weak, and that principles were worth defending. A young girl approached the memorial with her father, a veteran of the war. The girl asked why so many people had died. Her father knelt beside her and explained about freedom, about courage, about standing up for what was right even when it cost everything. "Will there be more wars?" the girl asked. Her father thought carefully before answering. "Maybe, but because of what these people did, because of what humanity showed the galaxy, maybe fewer, maybe shorter. Maybe we learned that talking is better than fighting." The girl placed a flower at the base of the memorial. "I hope so." Watched them leave and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. The war had been terrible, the costs almost unbearable. but it had also proven something essential about humanity and about the possibility of a better future. The Council had broken the line between diplomacy and war, between justice and tyranny. They had expected humanity to break under pressure. Instead, humanity rose with iron resolve and changed the galaxy forever. Not through conquest or domination, but by refusing to surrender their values. By fighting when they had to, but always keeping sight of what they fought for. By showing that strength came not from weapons alone, but from character, determination, and the courage to stand for what was right. The war was over. The peace remained fragile. But humanity had proven they could be trusted with both power and principles. They had earned their place among the stars not by submission, but by standing firm when it mattered most. The memorial would stand as a reminder of that truth. The names carved in stone would speak to future generations about the price of freedom and the strength of the human spirit. Earth remained, but its children had shown they were builders and protectors, not just survivors. The galaxy had learned that threatening humanity came with a cost. But more importantly, they had learned that humanity could be a force for good, for justice, for a better future. That was the true victory, the lasting legacy of those who fought and those who fell. The line had been broken, but from those broken pieces, something stronger had emerged. Not just human independence, but genuine cooperation among species who chose to work together as equals. That was worth fighting for. That was worth the price paid in iron and fire and blood. And as the sun set over Earth, casting long shadows across the memorial, humanity looked forward to the future they had earned. Free, strong, and ready to face whatever came next with the same resolve that had carried them through their darkest hour. The Council had broken the line between diplomacy and war. Now humanity would show them the cost of that choice. The iron resolve that had carried them through months of brutal combat would be tested one final time. And whatever the outcome, the galaxy would never forget what humanity had proven. They were not a species to be threatened, conquered, or cowed. They were humans, children of and they would stand free or not at all. But they had also sent a message. Humanity would not break. The Council had expected submission or quick defeat. Instead, they found an enemy that fought with innovation, courage, and a refusal to accept defeat. Admiral Jake Harrison studied the tactical reports and felt a grim satisfaction. The Battle of New Terra proved human tactics could work. Now they needed to take those lessons and apply them across all human space. The Council would come again, in greater numbers and with new strategies. But humanity had shown its iron resolve. They had risen to meet the challenge, and they had proven that Earth's children knew how to fight. The war was just beginning, but the first test had been passed. The galaxy now knew that threatening humanity came with a price written in fire and blood. The 72-hour deadline no longer mattered. The Council had received humanity's answer, and there was no room for misunderstanding. Earth would not kneel. The colonies would not surrender. Humanity would rise with iron resolve and show the galaxy what it meant to threaten a species born of a. The countdown had ended. Now came the storm. Managed a grim smile. We're really doing this. We're going to tell them no. We are, confirmed. And then we're going to show them exactly why Earth is called a. They wanted to know if humanity would fight for its freedom. They're about to get their answer. The countdown had begun. 72 hours until humanity's response was due. But in reality, the war had already started. The Council just didn't know it yet.